Kaisar sleeps, but doesn't awaken. I fear it is only a matter of days before death claims him.
In the Mojave Wasteland, many live and many die just as they had in the old world. But some deaths are not as cut and dry as we might think, resulting in ambiguity that quickly leads to disinformation. And no one's presumed state of life or death is more ambiguous than that of the Legion's founder, the mighty Kaisar himself. Today, we will address the rumors and find out, once and for all, the true fate of Lord Kaisar. The stage is set. Now, dear legionaries, welcome to the Wasteland. Founder of the Legion, Lord Kaisar, formerly known as Edward Sallow, began life out west in the old NCR. He grew up as a follower of the apocalypse near the ruins of Los Angeles, now known as the Great Boneyard. Raised in this faction of scholars and humanitarians, he would receive an extensive education, specializing in anthropology and linguistics, a fitting background for the man whose destiny was yet to be realized. In the year 2246, Sallow, accompanied by a physician named Bill Calhoun, and likely more members whose names have been forgotten to history, would depart from the Boneyard and embark on an expedition to the Grand Canyon, the purpose of which was to make contact with, learn, and record the dialects of the canyon's tribes. The road was long, and the desert scorching, sandstorms biting at the skin of the explorers. Making a brief stop to relieve themselves from the stinging winds, the expedition would uncover a cache of books that survived the Great War, entombed, kept safe from the harshness of the elements. Among them lay two specific texts that caught the attention of young Sallow, texts that once digested would change the course of history forever. Before this point, the extent of Sallow's knowledge of Imperial Rome is relatively unknown. However, that knowledge was definitively bolstered after reading these two books. The first, known as The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, covered many facets of ancient and imperial Rome, from their founding and cultural development throughout the years to the establishment of their overall ideology, religion, politics, and even economy. The second text was written by the historical Caesar himself. The text, aptly named Commentarii de Bello Gallico, is a personal accounting of Caesar's conquering of local tribes during his invasion of Gaul. Sallow would dig deep into this literature for several weeks, forming the seed that would eventually grow into his grand vision. Along the way, the party would meet with a Mormon missionary and tribal specialist by the name of Joshua Graham. Together with Graham, they would soon make contact with the first of the Grand Canyon tribes, the Blackfoot. Things were going well, more or less, but after a mistranslation in conversation, the party's relationship with the Blackfoot tribe would quickly sour, leading the tribe to capture the party and attempt to hold them for ransom. Taking notice of the Blackfoot's precarious position with their neighbors, notably the 7 other tribes they were actively at war with, Sallow realized that if the group didn't act, they would soon be eliminated with the rest of the tribe. Against the objections of Calhoun, Sallow would strike a deal with the Blackfoot. He would train them in the art of war in exchange for the group's freedom. The tribe would accept, and during the conquering of these 7 opposing tribes, would recognize Sallow as their war chief. It was in this act that Edward Sallow would cease to exist, and Lord Kaisar, founder of the mighty Legion, was born. 35 years have passed since these events, and in that time, Kaisar's expansion has not ceased, having conquered and assimilated 87 tribes into his legion, and forging an empire that spans across 4 US states. While no doubt impressive, all things must come to an end. And for Lord Kaisar, it appears his time at the head of the Legion is up. Lately, Kaisar has been secluding himself to his tent, complaining of headaches. When the Centurion Seleucus was awaiting orders for a time-critical mission, It took Kaisar 3 days before he could issue the order to dispatch them, forcing Seleucus and his men to operate on old intel, which resulted in the loss of the entire Centuria after an NCR ambush. To add to this, Kaisar's left leg has been dragging, his face sunken in, sickly, and he stopped speaking mid-conversation, only to continue minutes later as if nothing happened. It's clear that whatever the condition he's facing is, it's severe, and it's affecting his ability to lead. With a decent knowledge of medicine, we can deduce that Kaisar is suffering from a brain lesion, a condition that will prove to be fatal if not operated on quickly. This is where his dilemma lies. It's a common misconception that if the courier does not assist Kaisar in removing his tumor, that Kaisar will undoubtedly fall into a coma and pass away from his illness prior to the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. Upon notifying Kaisar of his condition, it's revealed that Kaisar already knew that it was a brain lesion, with the context of his conversation with the courier revealing that Kaisar had simply been testing them. He knew he needed a physician, and he wanted to see whether the courier could be the one to fill this role and perform the surgery, or if he could only rely on them to fetch the tools to do so. Should the courier not prove worthy, Kaisar would need to find someone else, and quickly. In this event, it's most likely that Kaisar would turn his attention to the local chapter of the Followers of the Apocalypse. Having been one himself, he is personally aware of their medical prowess, and would seek to capture a doctor to fulfill this role. This isn't unreasonable to assume either, as we can see Kaisar offer to purchase Arcade Ganon from the courier, should the option arise, showing firsthand his willingness to accept the help from a fellow follower of the Apocalypse. During this conversation, it's also revealed that Kaisar is aware of the location of an abandoned vault that could potentially house a diagnostic scanning module for his Mark III autodoc, that, if equipped, would render his need for a personal physician moot. With all the knowledge before him prior to falling into a comatose state, Kaisar dispatches the courier to gather these components needed to save his life. Through the eyes of the courier, we can see firsthand how each of these paths would play out, with the latter option proving to be the most difficult of these tasks. In the ruins of Vault 34, amongst the horde of feral ghouls and radiation, lies an old Mark III autodoc, containing within it a functioning diagnostic scanning module. In order to retrieve it, one must ascend several floors, clearing the infestation along the way. A feat that would be easily accomplished by battle-tested hardened legionaries, as the feral ghouls wouldn't provide much of a challenge to these seasoned warriors, and the level of radiation emanating throughout the vault isn't quite high enough to kill them. Not before they could retrieve the module and escape, that is. The chance of success is even higher for Frumentarii, who would be more likely to have been sent out on a mission of this magnitude, and would also have permission to use radiation chems to increase their chances of survival. In the unlikely event that the Legion fails to get their hands on a functioning diagnostic scanning module from Vault 34, they would certainly succeed in finding and capturing a physician. Throughout the Mojave Wasteland, the Followers of the Apocalypse can be found servicing the members of the community in several locations, from their headquarters at the Old Mormon Fort in Freeside to their outpost just south of the Grub and Gulp rest stop. In all of these locations, several doctors can be found and kept safe by a handful of guards. In one location specifically, not only can a doctor be found, but so too can the tools needed to perform Kaisar's life-saving surgery. This, accompanied with their isolated location, makes the New Vegas Medical Clinic a prime target. There's also the possibility that the Legion doesn't need to seek external help in this matter, and is able to pull a physician from their own ranks. At the fort lives a slave named Siri, who was training to become a medical doctor in a small settlement in New Mexico before it was overran during a Legion raid. While her training is incomplete, her knowledge of first aid and tribal remedies proves useful to the Legion, who, as a whole, is largely ignorant of medical science. While Siri is likely not medically adept enough to successfully perform the surgery herself, her presence implies that there could be more amongst the Legion who have a background in medicine. and perhaps amongst the slaves, exists a doctor that could cure Kaisar of his ailment, circumventing the need to capture a doctor from the surrounding wasteland. Should the courier have died in that shallow grave outside of Goodsprings, it's certain that events would have transpired in much the same way, and once his symptoms became severe enough, Kaisar would have dispatched his legionaries, most likely his famed and efficient frumentarii, to collect the resources needed for this surgery. Through the speed and resourcefulness of his greatest men, Kaisar would ultimately survive his ordeal, one way or another, be it from the autodoc performing the surgery and saving his life, or from a doctor captured by the Legion and forced to operate on him. In any event, Kaisar lives, and goes on to challenge the NCR over the fate of New Vegas for a second time. Thank you so much for watching. I see a lot of comments on these videos talking about how Kaisar dies in every ending unless you save his life, and I always wondered where people get this notion. Kaisar is nothing if not resourceful, and all the information provided to us shows that he has the knowledge, means, and motive to cure his condition. Whether it's due to cut content, or the writer's inability to finish fleshing out the faction, the fate of Kaisar is never mentioned in-game for other playthroughs. It's not even alluded to. To add to this, there aren't any developer statements that allude to him for sure dying from this condition either. Looking at the in-game evidence, it's just not reasonable to assume that he would literally lay down and die without having some sort of contingency in place. For gameplay reasons, the player is that contingency, which makes for a great quest, but lore-wise, should the courier not help, should the courier have died, Kaisar would just have someone else do it, and the events would proceed normally. Now don't even get me started on the whole "the Legion dies with Kaisar" misconception. That's going to have to be a whole video in of itself. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you can be part of our wonderful community. Lastly, if you want to support the channel further, please leave me a super chat, become a channel member, or pick up a unique piece of merchandise from the TheNeoCypher store. You can also share pictures of you and your new merch with me on Instagram. I would love to see them. Links will be in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and until we meet next, Wale Amicus.